Armed men exchanged gunfire in the streets while tank cannons were aimed directly at the White House building. Moscow descended into full-scale civil conflict. This was not a movie scene, but the real Russian constitutional crisis of October 1993. President Boris Yeltsin ordered the military to surround parliament and bring the brutal power struggle to an end. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia did not immediately establish a stable political system. On one side stood Yeltsin and his supporters, who pushed for radical market reforms and closer ties with the West. On the other side were parliamentary leaders led by Speaker Ruslan Kaspalatov and Vice President Alexander Rutskoy, who opposed Yeltsin's shock therapy reforms and insisted that parliament held the highest authority in the country. By the summer of 1993, Moscow effectively had two presidents and two governments. On September 21, Yeltsin appeared on national television and unilaterally announced the dissolution of the Supreme Soviet. Parliament responded immediately and aggressively. Lawmakers convened an emergency session, voted to impeach Yeltsin, declared Vice President Rutskoy the acting president, and began forming a new government and defense ministry. Yeltsin refused to back down. He ordered military and police forces to surround the Russian White House, the seat of parliament. Soon afterward, electricity, water, and communications to the building were cut off, turning it into an isolated fortress under siege. Rutskoy responded in kind, distributing automatic weapons to supporters gathered around the White House. Both sides entered a tense armed standoff. Large numbers of armed supporters flooded into the building, constructing barricades and setting up machine gun positions in preparation for a final defense. The confrontation lasted for more than 10 days, with bloodshed seemingly inevitable. On October 3, tens of thousands of pro-parliament demonstrators broke through police barricades, and chaos erupted across Moscow. Protesters first seized the Moscow mayor's office, then launched a mass assault on the Ostankino television center in an attempt to seize control of the nation's media voice. Interior Ministry troops fought desperately to stop them. Fierce gun battles broke out immediately, with bullets flying through the streets. Civilians and journalists were caught in the crossfire, many collapsing after being shot as the situation spiraled completely out of control. Yeltsin then issued the order to storm the White House by force. In the early hours of October 4, the final assault began. Dozens of T-72 tanks and armored vehicles lined up along the Moscow River, their cannons aimed directly at the White House. At a.m., the first shell thundered into the building, followed by continuous bombardment. The upper floors of the White House were quickly engulfed in flames. Windows shattered as thick black smoke rose high above the city, visible from kilometers away. Armed defenders inside refused to surrender. From windows and fortified firing positions, they opened fire with machine guns and other weapons, turning the building into a battlefield. The roar of tank cannons mixed with relentless gunfire as soldiers and police advanced under armored cover, returning fire while pushing toward the building floor by floor. The streets were littered with shell casings, wounded civilians, and soldiers firing from prone positions. Violent clashes erupted on nearly every corner. Notably, the elite Alpha Group Special Forces unit was urgently deployed to participate in the assault. Equipped with advanced assault rifles and tactical gear, they entered the White House through multiple entrances under cover of tank fire, conducting room-by-room and floor-by-floor clearing operations. The bombardment continued throughout the entire day. The White House was left riddled with destruction, while casualties inside continued to mount and resistance gradually collapsed. By evening, a white flag was finally raised from the building. Speaker Kaspalatov and acting President Rutskoy emerged with the remaining defenders, only to be immediately detained and taken away in police vehicles. The Russian White House, once a symbol of the nation's political power, had been reduced to ruins under artillery fire. According to official figures, the crisis resulted in 142 deaths and 744 injuries. However, independent investigations and eyewitness journalists suggested that the true number of casualties was significantly higher. From that moment on, the Russian parliament lost its ability to effectively check presidential power. The presidency became vastly strengthened, setting Russia on a path toward highly centralized rule. The irony was striking. Just 2 years earlier, Yeltsin had famously stood atop a tank outside the White House during the 1991 Soviet coup attempt, presenting himself as a defender of parliament and democracy. Yet only 2 years later, he personally ordered tanks to shell that very same building, using military force to crush the parliament he once claimed to protect.